What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video. And in this video, we're going to continue our exploration of Treasure Format's best decks, or at least what I think to be its best decks are. And we're going to dive into Burn. Now, Burn is a deck that is largely the same as it was in MRL format, but if you're going straight from Critter format to this format, then it has changed quite a bit, and in some very exciting ways. But before we dive into all of that, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. We are trying to hit 400 subscribers by the end of January, and right now we're only at around like 375 or so. So we just need 25 more people to subscribe, and we'll be starting the new year off strong. In addition, if you're interested in trying out any of the formats that I show off in these videos, then we have a Discord server now. Link will be in the description below. It's an awesome place to try and get duels with people in these obscure formats and explore them even more. And lastly, if you enjoy the video, as always, please leave a like down below. But now that we've gotten all that out of the way, let's discuss Burn. Now, Magic Ruler introduced some very powerful new Burn tools to the deck. Chief among them being Toll and Chain Energy, two very powerful continuous spell cards that basically shut down a lot of your opponent's moves unless they want to pay life points. And these spells can stack, so if you have multiple of them on the field, your opponent might be forced to take a lot of damage to try and kill you before you can kill them. Luckily, we've got a lot of ways to prevent this from happening. A lot of the monsters in this deck replace themselves in ways that actually gain you life points or inflict more damage to your opponent, chief among them being Nimble Momonga and Giant Germ, both of which, when they're destroyed by battle, summon out more copies from the deck, but both of which do opposite things in terms of life points. Giant Germ inflicts 500 damage to your opponent, and Nimble Momonga gains you 1000 life points, which can be very useful if you yourself are playing around Chain Energy and Toll, because oftentimes you will have to play through these cards. Toll costs you 500 life points every time you declare an attack, and if your opponent has an empty board state, that life point cost may be worth paying. In addition, Chain Energy costs 500 life points every time you play a card from your hand, and you likely will have to do this over the course of the game. So while you're hoping that these cards will hurt your opponent more than you will have to take some pain from these, and things like Nimble Momonga can help mitigate that quite a bit. Mystic Tomato can also replace itself in battle, and even bring out something like a Giant Germ, for instance. And its 1400 attack stat line can be very advantageous in this format, and oftentimes you will be making aggressive pushes with these Mystic Tomatoes. They can also be used to fetch out, in addition to the Giant Germs or more copies of themselves, any of the other recruiters in the deck, namely being 2 Witch of the Black Forest or 2 Sangan. These are very powerful because they can replace themselves even if they're not destroyed by battle, and they can potentially get you very powerful monsters to hand like Giant Germ or Nimble Momonga. The last monster in the deck that you'd want to bring out off of a Mystic Tomato is Cannon Soldier, which can be very useful at dealing that last bit of damage to your opponent if they've been whittled down to a very low life point total and you've got some monsters on field. Cannon Soldier can tribute away your entire field and just finish them off, which is very, very powerful. The last monster in the deck is Spear Cretin, which I think is a very good card at stalling your opponent even longer, and also potentially getting out things like Giant Germ and Nimble Momonga to deal even more damage or gain even more life points. So Spear Cretin, I think, is very useful in this deck. It can also set up the Cretin loop, which means that you basically revive another Spear Cretin from your graveyard with its effect, and you've just got this infinite loop going where your opponent can't get through it. Your opponent will be able to theoretically fill up their entire board this way, which can be bad, but filling up their board that way can make them very vulnerable to one of the most powerful traps in our deck, which is Just Desserts. Just Desserts inflicts 500 damage to your opponent for each monster they control, and if your opponent is trying to build up their field using Spear Cretin, then Just Desserts can be very powerful in this regard. That pretty much does it for our burn cards, though. For our non-burn cards, we've got a suite of very powerful, just generically good cards. We, of course, have the Power 5 limit spells Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, and Raigeki, as well as the 3 hand rips, Delinquent Duo, Confiscation, and Forceful Sentry. But we also have 3 Giant Trunade, which can be very good at sort of clearing away your opponent's back row and forcing them to reset that back row if you have Chain Energy up. And also letting you play around your own burn spells, being able to send back a Chain Energy or a Toll to hand before you make a ton of attacks or play a bunch of cards can be very powerful. For the other traps, we have 3 Magic Jammer to stop things like Heavy Storm or Mystical Space Typhoon trying to target one of our continuous spells. This can be very, very good, and since you're playing a slower game most of the time, you likely will have cards in hand to discard off of this. And lastly, we have a Mirror Force, which is just a very powerful big blowout trap that can gain some additional protection from things like Magic Jammer, as oftentimes, if your opponent has a Heavy Storm, then setting Mirror Force can be a bit of a risk. Magic Jammer mitigates this risk somewhat, even though, you definitely don't want to be playing into Heavy Storm when you can avoid it. I think the side deck here is maybe a bit iffy. We have 2 Cannon Soldier if we want to bring in more copies, to get a bit more aggressive. We have 3 Man-Eater Bug if we want more removal. 1 Okazi and 3 Tremendous Fire if we just need more immediate burn. This can be good against things like mill decks that aren't necessarily going to attack through things like Toll. And they can even be good in the mirror match, I think, but it's a bit more iffy in the mirror match, especially Tremendous Fire, which costs you more life points to use as well. We also have 3 Solemn Judgment in case we really need it. In general, you don't want to bring this in because, things like Chain Energy and Toll, your life points are probably going to be decreasing pretty quickly. But if your opponent's on a ton of counter traps, then this could be worth an inclusion. And lastly, we have 3 Waboku in case our opponent is on a bit more of an aggressive deck. This can be a very good way to sort of insulate yourself against big offensive pushes, even in the face of something like a Heavy Storm. But that's going to do it for the deck discussion. I don't think this deck is perfect by any means. I think there are likely improvements that you can make on it. But I think that this initial build of it has served me pretty well. And I find the deck pretty fun to play, even though it can be a bit degenerate to play and to play against. I think it is very fun, and I think it is very well positioned in the meta of this format. But to show off a bit of what I mean, let's dive into a game. Okay, we've got a game against Colgate, who is a very active duelist on the Discord server, so always a pleasure to have them on the channel. They have some very innovative deck ideas, which you may see in this game as well. We, of course, are playing Burn. Unclear what they're playing right now, but we'll just have to wait and see. We are going to lose the rock, paper, scissors, unfortunately, so we will be going second here, which is kind of unfortunate. If we had a Chain Energy early, we'd like to set it up right away. But it looks like we don't actually have Chain Energy right away, so, not the worst thing in the world to go second then. Although that Confiscation would have been nice to play first turn. They're just going to set 2 and pass back to us, and we draw Dark Hole. We're not going to use it right now, as it is a bit greedy just to Dark Hole immediately. If it's a Recruiter, then they get value off of it. Yes, we have the Confiscation to deal with that, but we want to basically snipe any spell and trap removal that they might have in hand, given that we have a Toll and it's a very powerful back row here. So we activate Confiscation first just to see what they're doing. And they've got a Heavy Storm, so that is likely going to be the card that we take with the Confiscation, as we want to keep our back row intact. They've also got a Dark Hole, Cannon Soldier, Mechanical Chaser, so they've got some very good offensive pressure and a Dark Hole to act as board removal, which is very worrying for us. We'll just have to take the Heavy Storm, though, and just, hope that's enough, and hope that we can play around whatever else they have. So we discard the Heavy, and we write down what they have remaining, so that way we can keep track of it more easily. Then we're just going to set them a Manga in hand, activate Toll, and just set Mirror Force and just Desserts. If they have set another Heavy here, and they just drew 2 of them right away, then we get majorly punished for this. But I think this is better to sort of play around the hand rips over something like a Heavy, as they only have 1 more Heavy in their deck maximum at this point, but they've got 3 potential hand rips that they can draw. If they do hand rip away the Dark Hole, that's unfortunate, but I think it's good to preserve the Just Desserts and the Mirror Force here on field. We can also chain Just Desserts to a Heavy Storm activation, which isn't the best, but it is 500 damage, so it is what it is. Unfortunately, that set is just Change of Heart, so they will be able to take our Manga, and they will be able to tribute it off with the Cannon Soldier, using Prio to get rid of it and inflict 500 damage to us. They reveal that they did draw a Comfy here, so we will lose our Dark Hole, which is very unfortunate, as that would have been great on this board here. And they're going to think for a bit, but they're not actually going to flip up their set and attack. They're just going to attack him with the Cannon Soldier, which makes sense. They are fearing Mirror Force for good reason. So we will just take that 14, pass back to us, and we draw Mystic Tomato, which is honestly one of the best cards we could have drawn in this situation. We're just going to summon it out, and we're going to pay the 500 to attack into that Cannon Soldier. And this is what I mean by, This continuous spells are very good at whittling down your opponent, but they can hurt you as well. So you've always got to keep in mind sort of playing around your own continuous spells. Unfortunately, we do have to just play through this. We'll attack into the cannon. And we are indeed actually going to attack into their set, figuring that it might be something like a Magician of Faith or something. So we don't want them to just have it on field to act as fodder for another cannon soldier. So we're just attacking into it. Unfortunately, we are wrong, and it's actually a Flying Kamakiri #1, which is pretty cool. It means that they are likely on like a Harpy deck or something. They aren't going to bring out Harpy, though, but they are going to bring out another Flying Kamakiri #1. And they're just going to, we're just going to pass back to them. And they will bring out a Mechanical Chaser and try to get a ton of damage in here. They're going to pay 500 to try attacking into our Witch. Luckily, we do have the Mirror Force, so we will be able to clear away their entire board there. And we do draw a Cannon Soldier, so we could get a bit aggressive here. I believe that they haven't used up Dark Hole yet. They have not. So this would be playing into Dark Hole a little bit, but it is getting a lot of damage in on them. So we are just going to go for it. So we'll pay 1,000, but we'll drop them down by 2,500. Tribute off the Witch to drop them down 500 more, and we'll get a search here. So we're going to grab a Nimble Momonga. Now, if they do want to activate the Dark Hole on the Cannon Soldier, it's a lot less good. And we do have another monster to attack in next turn for potentially lethal. They're just going to set one, pass back to us. There's no real need for us to attack into that, so we're just going to switch the Cannon Soldier defense, pass back to them. And they're just going to pass back to us. We draw Chain Energy, which is interesting. We could actually play the Chain Energy here. However, it might be a bit too risky since we are at such low life points. We really do want the Momonga to get attacked into and then gain us 1,000 because we are running low. But we do know that they have the Dark Hole in hand, so we want to have our Magic Jammer online to prevent that from happening. It's kind of iffy. There's a lot of different things we could do here. And so we're going to think about it, and we're just going to pass back to them. And they're going to activate Last Will, and then they're going to activate Dark Hole. And I think this was actually a slight misordering, as in this format, you can actually activate Last Will after a monster's been destroyed. So we are actually just going to Magic Jammer that, prevent them from triggering the Last Will. And they're just going to get the Witch back, set face down, which is important, you know. And we're just going to play as if we don't know what it is, because that's the polite thing to do. We're going to set a Momonga, and then to play around Raigeki a little bit, we're actually going to tribute off the Cannon Soldier, dealing 500. And just hope that they attack into our set here, gaining us 1,000. They do have Raigeki, so I'm very glad we played around that a little bit. And they're going to flip up the Witch and attack in. So they will take 500, but we'll drop down 11, and that equalizes the life point total here, which is quite unfortunate. We're just going to set a Momonga, pass back to them, hope to gain 1,000 here. And they're just going to summon out a Sangan. They're just going to go for some attacks here. They're going to pay 500, and we will gain 1,000 from that, but we are out of Momongas. And then they are going to attack him with the Sangan, and little do they know, but this is actually game. They'll drop down to 1,000, and since we have the Just Desserts here, we can now activate it, and that will actually deal them their last bit of life points. So I hope that this game showed how effective this deck can be, even if it's only got one continuous spell to its name. Toll whittled them down slowly but surely over the course of that game, and we did manage to get aggressive and deal a lot of damage that way, but without those Toll activations, you know, the Just Desserts at the end would not have been able to kill them. So the continuous spells can be very oppressive and force the opponent to sort of play a lot more conservatively than they would be otherwise. In addition, things like Magic Jammer can be very useful at stopping big power spells, as we did stop their Dark Hole Last Will combo there, which I think was a very big thing to stop. So I'm very glad we had that on hand to do that. But going into game 2, I don't really think I'd change up anything about the deck. Maybe I add in some more Cannon Soldiers or Wolbokus, as Harpies is a bit more aggressive, but we were able to deal with it very handily in game 1. So let's see if we're able to do just as good in game 2. So we will be going second again, as they do get to pick to go first here. And this is not the best hand, but we do have Toll in the opener again, which is somewhat nice. So we're just going to set the bug, activate Toll, and set a True Nade. just to snipe any particular spell and trap removal, and it does actually serve that purpose. So they waste a Mystical Space Typhoon on a True Nade, and we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to think about what to do here. They're going to bring out Cannon Soldier and just tribute off that Sangan right away, grab a Witch of the Black Forest, and they're just going to activate Last Will to bring out another monster on top of that. This is a really big push here. They're going to get a Harpy Lady, and they do have the Elegant Egotist. So they're going to be able to go all in here. And even though they will have to pay a bunch of life points to attack into our board here, you know, they're dealing a lot of potential damage. So they're going to attack in with the Cannon Soldier first. It's a Man-Eater bug, so we will be able to pop that Harpy Lady Sisters there. And they're going to attack in with the Harpy Lady as well. So they'll drop down to 7,000, but they'll have gotten us down to 6,200. And this is a bit worrying here. We will just Dark Hole the board away, just to clear that Cannon Soldier, clear the Harpy Lady, and also just bring out a Germ to attack in. We're going to pass back to them, just fearing heavy a bit, as game 2 and 3, they likely will have more spell and trap removal sided in. So we don't want to commit 2 spells and traps to board. They're just going to attack in with the Witch here. So we'll take 100, but they'll take 500. And then an additional 500 by the Germ dying in battle. And main 2, they're just going to pass back to us. We draw Change of Heart, which we could actually just go all in on here and use. And I think that is what we're going to do. We're going to True Nade the Toll, so that way we aren't taking as much damage from this, as we'd have to pay 1,500 if we wanted to pull this off otherwise. And we're just going to attack in for 3,100, which we figure is likely enough to get them down to a point where we could potentially kill them later. Main 2, we're just going to reactivate the Toll and pass that Witch back to them. And I think we're in a pretty good position. They will heavy the Toll, which makes me very glad that we didn't set the Mirror Force as well. And they're going to think about what to do here. They're going to Reborn, targeting that Harpy Lady Sisters, getting it back to field. And they're going to summon out another Cannon Soldier. So they'll be able to get a lot of damage in here, attacking into our Giant Germs. So they will take, 1,000 from this, which is pretty good, dropping them down to 900. But they'll be able to drop us down to 3,150. And it looks like they're going to go a bit further here, tributing off that Witch to grab a Sangan, which makes sense, dealing 500 more to us, and then passing back to us. We draw a Man-Eater bug, which is pretty nice. We'll just set a Mirror Force here. And they're going to Raigeki away our Man-Eater bug. That's very worrying. Looks like we will just have to use the Mirror Force right away. They're going to bring out a Sangan, and this will be a very good board to Mirror Force if we can. But unfortunately, they are going to play around that. They're going to tribute off the Sangan, grab a Flying Kamakiri, and then they're going to tribute off the Cannon Soldier, dropping us down to a point where the Harpy Lady Sisters will be able to kill us on attack. And this is a very smart thing to do. So they're going to attack him with the Harpy Lady Sisters. We will have to Mirror Force this, but we're in a very tough spot. We're down very, very low, and they've got a monster in hand that is very good. So we just got to hope we get something good. Chain Energy is not that, because if we activate Chain Energy here, they can just attack indirectly with the Flying Kamakiri and get it to a point where we can't actually play anything. Even though they also won't be able to play anything at that point, they'll have a monster on board, and thus will be able to kill us. So we can't actually activate that Chain Energy. We just have to set it and hope that they think it's a trap hole or something and try playing around it. Unfortunately, they have a Mystical Space Typhoon, so they'll be able to play around it anyways. They summon out a Mechanical Chaser, and we'll just be able to attack in for game. So game 2 went a bit more poorly for us, but, I think honestly that game 2 showed off the power of the Harpy deck. That deck can get really aggressive really quickly, and this deck can have a bit of trouble against decks that do that, as if it doesn't have time to actually get all of its setup on board, then it can be put in a pretty tough spot. That being said, I still think the game was very close. We got them down to 900. If they were just 500 points less, than activating that Chain Energy on the last turn would actually just be basically the end of the game. But unfortunately, things didn't quite work out that way, and so we lost game 2. Game 3, though, is going to be really exciting. Both of these decks have been putting up very good performances here, and I'm very excited to see how game 3 goes. So we are going to be going first, and this is a killer hand, honestly. We've drawn Toll in the opening hand every time, which, you'd prefer to draw Chain Energy in the opener more than Toll, as Chain Energy can really make your opponent suffer when they're trying to set up their board early on. But, Toll has been serving us pretty well so far. So we're just going to summon out Cannon Soldier, activate Toll, set a Waboku, pass back to them. If they do have Heavy Storm, we can chain Waboku to it. This is maybe a bit of a risk because they could like Snatch Steal or Change of Heart or Cannon Soldier and distribute it away. But, you know, we're going to take that risk, I guess. And they're just going to set one. So we feel pretty good about that. We don't really feel the need to attack here, so we're just going to pass back to them. They're just going to set another, pass back to us. And we draw Change of Heart, which is very nice with a Cannon Soldier. But given that they have 2 sets, we don't really feel the need to do anything about this. They are going to Mystical Space Typhoon, targeting our set background. We're going to chain Waboku. So they're going to bring out a Cannon Soldier of their own, tributing off a Witch's Black Force here, grabbing back a Sangan. And I think they didn't realize that we had chained Waboku. So they're just going to pass back to us. And, you know, we let them take back the 500 decrease there. Weird is drawing Power Spell after Power Spell. We draw Pot of Greed, which is very nice. And we draw a Magic Jammer on top of that, which, given how many cards we have in hand, is really good here. We're just going to set 2 and pass. You know, that Cannon Soldier can be a bit of a threat if it actually, you know, gets to the point where it's distributing off cards constantly. But I'm not too worried about it right now, as we do have 7,500 life points, which is quite a lot. We're going to think about this. Bring out a Sangan. And they're going to tribute away the Sangan, deal an additional 500, search out another Sangan from their deck, and they're just going to tribute off the Cannon Soldier as well. I guess they're afraid that we have like a Mirror Force or something, which we do, so that is a very good fear. Unfortunately for them, this lets us Change of Heart their set monster, and they reveal that it's a Banisher of the Light, which is a very interesting side deck choice here. I guess they're trying to stop things like Nimble Momonga and Giant Germ, and also prevent Spear Cretin from being as useful as well. So I actually think this is a pretty sick side deck tech here. It also, you know, is 2,000 defense, which prevents us from getting in for damage. Unfortunately for them, you know, we are able to Change of Heart it, so we will be able to tribute it off with the Cannon Soldier at the end of the turn. We're going to summon out a Witch and then get Cannoning, so we will tribute that away. And all told, you know, we had to pay 1,000 this turn to attack in, but we dropped them down to 5,000, so they're still lower than we are. And we are going to just tribute off the Witch, grab a Sangan, and pass back to them. They're going to set 1, pass back to us, and we're just going to set Just Desserts, set a Sangan, and tribute it off for a Witch here. Just, you know, dealing 500 damage a turn is pretty nice. And, they realized that they had 7 cards in hand at the end of the turn, so they do discard 1. Didn't really matter here, but good to see that they remembered that. They're just going to set a monster, pass back to us, and actually this is a pretty good time to do this. We're going to Just Desserts, dropping them down by 1,000 more. We're going to tribute off the Cannon Soldier, and then we're going to Dark Hole their board away. Now we can summon out the Witch and reborn the Cannon Soldier. And this will just be game on board unless they have like a Karibo or something. And even if they have a Karibo, we can drop them down to a point where they've got 400 life points and thus can't attack anymore. So I think that this game is pretty much wrapped up, and that will indeed be the end of the game. Now, to be fair, in Game 3, we did draw a lot of powerful spells that enable us to just completely blow out our opponent. But I do think that these games did show how powerfully oppressive Burn can be. And it can be even more oppressive if, instead of relying on Toll, you actually get Chain Energies early and activate the Chain Energies, as that can be really tough for your opponent to play around and play through. All in all, I think this deck is really, really sick, and one that you should sort of be prepared to play against, and, you know, sort of have a plan in mind to play against, because I think that this is a very good deck and potentially is tier 1. You know, I thought it was one of the better decks in MRL format, last format, and the limited list didn't really hit anything from this deck. Sure, it hit the hand rips, but honestly, this deck doesn't really care about hand ripping. And it just sort of replaced 3 Forceful Sentries with 1 Forceful Sentry and 1 of the other hand rips as well. So I think Burn is very well positioned in the meta right now, and I look forward to people experimenting with this more, as my list is certainly not the end-all be-all. It's just sort of an initial take on the deck that I think does do very well. But what do you all think? What would you like to see changed in this deck for the future? Do you think I should add more tolls? Do you think that I should add more counter traps like Solemn to the main deck to play around sort of spell and trap removal even more? Let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.